It seems like whenever you meet a new student, or whenever I meet a new student, very quickly in that first couple of questions and answers, there's always the question of, well, what do you study, or what's your major? Or if somebody is an upperclassman nearing the end of their time, you might ask questions about internships that they've experienced or plans that they might have after graduation. And while this is very common questions that we ask one another, very normal and fairly innocent things to be talking about, I do think there's something significant and profound. There's something deep here, because what we're asking one another are basically questions about our vocation. Now, I know that anytime you use that vocation word in a Catholic context, young people get nervous because they're worried that somehow or other I'm going to try to convince them to be a priest or a nun. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not where we're going. That's not the point of this homily. But if you do want to be a priest or a nun, I'll talk to you after church. Here's the thing. Our vocation is that which we give our life, our passion, our talent, our gift of ourselves. We call that sacrifice. What we give ourselves to others and to this world to make the world better. What you do by way of serving this world, that is your vocation. And the consistent message in every reading that we heard today, from the first reading, the responsorial psalm, the second reading, and the gospel, is a singular theme. Your vocation is to be holy. You are called to be holy, and with that holiness, to serve the world. You see, the world in which we live consistently challenges us to be happy. To find that thing in life which will give us the maximized amount of contentment, comfort, pleasure, and significance. To fulfill every one of our desires and soothe every one of our longings so that we could then be happy. That's not your vocation. That's not how we as Christians understand the role that we are supposed to have in this world. Rather, your vocation is to be holy. And that requires a gift of yourself in sacrifice. So think about where you feel called. Think about that thing in life that seems to draw you ever more into the future. Maybe it's a passion for helping others, and you study public health. Maybe it's a desire for order and neatness and for commerce that allows this world to work well. And maybe you're called into the world of business or accounting. Whatever it is, I can go on all evening about the various examples that ideals and noble aspirations draws you into the future. This is your vocation. This is the desire God has placed upon your heart to be holy and to sacrifice yourself for our world. And while being holy is important, I want to remind you what Isaiah said to the people who heard his letter. Isaiah said, it's not enough. This is speaking on behalf of God. It is not enough for you just to be my servants. It's not enough for you just to be holy. There's something more going on here. It's not enough for you just to have that one-on-one relationship between you and God. That is important, by the way. If you don't have a personal relationship with Jesus, we need to talk. Because I can help, and I'm convinced that's very, very important to the central point of what we're doing here and what we're doing in life. But as Isaiah says, yet still, that is not enough. He said, it's not enough for you just to be my servant. Rather, you are called to be a light to the nations. You are called to live out that life of holiness, to live out that profound relationship which you have with Jesus, to live out your own vocation in such a way that your passions, your talents, your ability, and your gift of yourself serves this world. Think about it this way. How often do we wish our world were better? How often do we wish that courageous, noble people would rise up and penetrate the corners of our world to bring about something that looks like goodness and truth and justice? How often do we long for people like that to go out and transform our world? Here's a clue. Those people are you. You are called in your vocation to live out God's righteousness and justice, to live your faith into whatever part of this world God is calling you. I'm not suggesting that you should go out into the world and be that annoying Jesus person. We all know somebody like that, right? Constantly nagging you and bugging you and kind of making you feel awkward because they just talk about faith nonstop. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you loving and serving and living and being an example first and foremost of faith. All of the ways in which our world needs justice, goodness, order, and holiness, it's your vocation that the world needs. This is the challenge of our faith. This is what every single passage was talking about today. That wherever you find yourself called is where God wants you to bring good things, to be an example, to be a model. And I don't think that it's appropriate to simply say, well, someone else will do it. It's someone else's job. Or whoever's at the top, they need to fix things. Or whatever it is, whatever ways we convince ourselves that someone else is responsible and I can just look after myself. That's not good enough. We've been united into Jesus Christ and the life of God by our baptism. St. Paul said it, you are called to be holy. John the Baptist echoed it, that he was called to testify about Jesus. That the reason he was doing what he was doing was so that other people could know who Jesus is. We need you, and God calls you to be that example to others, to be that model of faith and justice and goodness and truth into the world that so desperately needs you. The life of a disciple is not good enough for us simply to look after our own spirituality, but rather our lives have to be lived out in this public way outside these walls. And here's the good news. You have a little time yet before you do it in the real world. The bad news is the place to practice is right here on campus. Practice being that example. Practice being that model. Practice being that inspiration to others that doesn't nag them about their faith, but by the way that you live, by the joy and the peace that you know, inspires and invites them to seek what has transformed your life. Your life and mine should be lived in such a way that wherever we find ourselves, whatever we're doing, the very prayer that bubbles up from the depths of our heart is what we said in the responsorial psalm. Here I am, Lord. I have come to do your will.